Equinox Information Systems began serving the telecommunications industry in 1986 and joined the Communications Fraud Control Association a few years later. As a CFCA member and sponsor for over 30 years, we have seen a lot of changes as the industry has grown and the threat of toll fraud has evolved. We were recently asked to participate in a CFCA event to share our unique perspective and talk about our history with the CFCA. My colleagues Amy Oldham, Byron Biddendorf, Christy Vinoye, and I appreciated the chance to reflect on the last 35 years of partnership and friendship with our customers in the entire CFCA community. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as we did.
Thanks, Sarah. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Amy Oldham with Equinox. I'm going to start by introducing myself and those of us that are on the panel. I joined the team at Equinox in 2010 as their first ever technical writer. And before that, I did technical writing at 2 other companies in Ohio before I moved back to Tennessee. Here at Equinox, I create all the internal and external documentation for our products and marketing and email campaigns, newsletters. If it's got writing, I was involved in it. So that's my role here at Equinox. And it's a great team, and I've been here, as I said, since 2010. I'd like to next introduce Byron, who is the founder of Equinox. He founded the company in 1986. Before that, he was an account executive at AT&T, and he was a director of telecommunications for the state of Tennessee. And as our CEO, he oversees the growth of Equinox, and he started us from an early adopter of technology to the leading software solution supplier in the U.S. telecom market. His influence is seen every day here around the company and our culture and the way we interact with our customers. Next, I'd like to introduce Christy Vinoye, who many of you probably know from CFCA. She's been to many meetings. She joined Equinox in 1998, and her role here is to provide training for all of the Protector and Telelink installations. She also helps all of the Protector customers make sure their system is configured, and she provides fraud monitoring consultation based on her years of experience and interaction with over 100 different fraud management implementations. She's definitely an expert. Before she joined the team here, she worked for the University of Texas Medical Branch for, I think, 11 years, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you, Christy, for joining us. And next is David West. He joined Equinox in 1996 with a focus on sales and strategic planning. He's still in this role today. He oversees all of our sales and marketing efforts, and he works closely with customers and the developers to ensure that our solutions meet the changing needs of the telecom and fraud management industry. Before he joined the team at Equinox, David spent 5 years in the publishing industry with roles in sales and project management. So thank you all for joining us today on the panel and in the audience. So I'm going to start talking about, ever since I've been here, as I said, I joined the team in 2010, and ever since I've been here, we have been an active participant and sponsor of CFCA, but our involvement started long before I joined, decades before I joined the company. In fact, Byron's first attendance at a CFCA meeting was in 1989 in New Orleans. And so I'm going to start by asking Byron about the importance of Equinox affiliation with CFCA through all of these years. Byron?
Well, thank you, Amy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. First, I want to tell Sarah, thank you for saying we all look young. It's the filters that we're using, I'm sure. It has nothing to do with reality. Like Amy said, it was started the company in 1986, very, very young when I started. But CFCA, Wayne and I have a partner, Wayne Lowe, who I'll refer to sometimes in this discussion today. We had started off writing software for allowing people to choose who they wanted their long distance carrier to be. It was right after the modified consent decree, and there were lots of new companies out there. But at some point, we had a customer in South Carolina call us and tell us that they had set up some payphones in Florida incorrectly. And so anyone in Florida could walk up to the payphones for this particular company and just start dialing international calls. And this guy called us in a panic and said, "Is there anything you can do to help us?" We had a very, very intuitive and smart. One of the smartest men I've ever known, Dennis Wynn, worked for us. We went up to Dennis's office and said, "Hey, Dennis, this is a problem. Can you solve it?" And so we had the ability to shut off the payphones as soon as we saw an international call. And that's how Equinox got into the fraud market. We heard about CFCA, probably 1989. There was a fellow by the name of Walt Fryer, I think, from WorldCom, who was the head of CFCA at the time. It was just a very small group. I think the first meeting I ever went to, maybe there were 10 of us or a dozen of us. But it's meant a lot to us over the years. I don't think an Equinox employee has ever missed a CFCA meeting since then. And when it's the same, a lot of the same people that you've heard of: Clemmy Scott, Dana Bruce Berry, Adam, Mary Hockheimer, Heather Davis, lots of people over the years that have been really consistent. Jason Lane Sellers, I hear you're on here. When was your first time, Jason? Do you remember? Maybe not. I guess he's lost his voice.
Byron, he doesn't want to say that it was 1749.
I'll tell you what, this is the first time Jason Lane Sellers has ever lost his voice. I'll just tell you that right now. Anyway, we had a great time. So Equinox, we've been around for 35 years. And I think the most important part of Equinox's role in CFCA is because we've been around so long, but not just as a company. But when we started Equinox, we decided that we wanted to create a great place to work. Wayne and I had come from a company that worked their employees pretty hard, worked 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And we decided what we wanted was to create a place that we enjoyed coming to work. We're not ever going to work nights. We're not going to work weekends. We're not going to work over 40 hours a week. And so we created this environment, or this company, that people enjoyed working for. And so because of that, I think our average tenure probably now is about 17 years. So we're kind of a repository for knowledge about the fraud industry, not just as a company, but the same people who wrote some of the original software are still here. So we've seen the trends in fraud over the years. I think we've now served probably 300 different companies across the world with fraud software. We have what we call the users group. I guess we've had those for about 25 years. And all of our customers bring us the ideas. They tell us what's happening in the fraud market. We take their experience and we integrate it into our software for catching fraud. And we've become very good and very dominant, I think, in this market because of the longevity that we have with our employees and with the company.
Thanks, Byron. So in addition to, we talked about your first meeting there, but we're not just participants in the meetings. We have been an active sponsor of CFCA because of our involvement with fraud management. We've been a sponsor since 1997 continuously. And as a result, our employees have attended, as you said, every meeting thus far. Christy, her first meeting was in 2000 in Anchorage, Alaska, of all places. But it's not unusual for Christy to travel all over the place. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your travels and where you've been and how that relates to CFCA?
Oh, thanks, Amy. Actually, that meeting in Anchorage, I actually happened to be in Anchorage at the time that CFCA was there, and that was the reason that I got to go to my first CFCA. I was there working with a customer in Anchorage. I think that the last time I checked, I have actually trained customers in 45 states, several countries throughout the Caribbean. I think the furthest I've gone is Australia. We just, the CFCA has been a really active part of our fraud management system. We always encourage every customer that we have to become a member of the CFCA. We encourage them, even if, it's very unlikely that most of our customers can attend, every meeting, but to try to get to at least one meeting per year. We use the CFCA meetings become almost like an extension of our users group meetings. We, when we're at the CFCA meetings, we're comparing notes after sessions and we, just really use that as an opportunity to build those relationships with our customers, talk with people at other companies and try to learn as much as we can.
Yeah, so I know Byron mentioned the fact about making a company that's a great place to work. And one of the key principles that we have at Equinox is that we really want to take care of our customers and develop relationships. And it sounds like CFCA plays a very important role in how we go about doing that. Don't you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I absolutely. I think that, well, in addition to, encouraging our customers to be there when we are at the CFCA, we really try to use that as an opportunity to, further build those bonds that, with our customers, get to know people better. It's, the CFCA has just been a really important part of our relationship with particularly our fraud management customers, obviously, but we always try to host a dinner, at every meeting, so that, one of the things that I think is really nice about the CFCA is when we're there and we're together, we're not really competitors. We're not, it's not,
Right.
The carriers become like collaborators, even the vendors. It's one of the few organizations that I think that you're ever going to hear vendors presenting information to other vendors. We're all in the rooms together, sharing information. I just think it's been such a valuable, part of our progression.
Yes.
And the CFCA meetings, I talk about traveling for work, but I enjoy all of the locations that we've had the CFCA meetings. I'm looking forward to, being at the next CFCA meeting in person and actually seeing people's faces and reconnecting with a lot of friends.
Yes, absolutely. And I know you and Byron have attended some of the CFCA meetings together. So I'm going to ask Byron what have you noticed about how fraud has evolved during your tenure in telecom and your association with CFCA, Byron?
Well, it's changed a lot. I've heard Adam tell the story about the Captain Crunch whistle, where you could blow the Captain Crunch whistle and it would set off, give you access to people's long distance networks. Some of the early on, we found a video that was on it. You guys might remember a TV show called Dateline, and on Dateline they did a special about call fraud. It was payphone fraud. It was John Stossel, I think, is the man who did it, and they showed the customer, a small company, opening a phone bill for $125,000 for someone had hacked into his PBX. Probably the most interesting fraud scenario that I ever heard of was, for those of you that are born earlier than me, there's probably nobody here born earlier than me, but if you can remember the payphones that used to be outside airports, at the gates, there would be a bank of payphones. And in New York, there was, I guess, organized crime, mafia, whatever you want to call them. They had developed a technique of looking at the schedules of when flights were going to arrive at LaGuardia Airport. And they would take the bank of payphones and they would disable the ringers on the payphones. So as soon as the flight arrived, someone would call all the payphones at that bank and they would start ringing, but no one could hear it. So as the passengers exited the plane, got to the payphones to call back to their office or call home or whatever, they would pick up the headset, not hear any dial tone, and they would flip the switch hook to see if they could get dial tone. And when they did that, they activated three-way calling. So once the three-way calling was activated and they got dial tone, they would dial their 800 number to access their long distance carrier. Then they would put in the destination number that they wanted to dial. And then they would put in their authorization code or their calling card. And the whole time, because it's a three-way call, there's someone on that call with them recording all the tones that are going on. And by the time they get through to whoever they're calling, that authorization code or that calling card was being sold to call cell operators all across the world. So it was very sophisticated and they were making lots and lots of money. So from there, you've gone to the IRSRF, to international revenue share fraud. You've gone to the Philippines, the hacking of the PBXs from the Philippines. It's just been, as long as there's money involved, there will always be criminals trying to outsmart the carriers. And so I've often said that selling fraud software into this market is almost like selling insurance. There's always going to be a need for it. David is much more intricately involved in it than I am now, but it will always change and it will always be there. And our customers keep us up to date on what the latest fraud trends are.
Thank you. And speaking of David, many of you in CFCA know David from meetings, but you also may know him from his role in sales here at Equinox, because he does informative webinars and presentations about fraud management, usage analytics. His first time to go to a CFCA meeting was in 1998 in Phoenix. So David, I want you to comment. Byron just mentioned some fraud types and how he's seen those evolved. I'd like you to comment on how, what effect you've seen that they've had on fraud management solutions from your point of view, from the sales side of things, please. David, are you muted?
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm a telecom expert. Yeah, we certainly in the 26, 27 years I've been here, we've seen a lot of evolution. Within Protector, we started early. Our earliest versions of Protector, we had one version that was looking at call count, and another version, that was for like the DMS switch, and for the DEX switch, we were looking at minutes of usage. And I remember being very excited as a salesperson when we finally were able to combine those two into a single application that would look at both minutes of usage and call count. And then just kind of, it's continued, our solutions continue to evolve from there. I think in recent years, the biggest changes have been the ways, we 15, 20 years ago, you could go to like a DMS switch and do an X.25 link, and you could get the CDR records in a stream. So it was pretty close to real time. And then as everyone migrated to soft switches, it became more batch oriented, and you got some additional latency in there. And then, in recent years, there's been a lot of movement in the industry and with our applications as well, trying to get further forward in call flow, looking at different types of records, looking at SIP invites and registrations, looking at start records, attempt records, route failures, those kinds of things. So, definitely a lot of evolution in just what data sets you're looking at, and what data points are in those data sets. And another big change for us with Protector is continue to get more and more granular. So, going from looking at just total minutes of usage, domestic versus international and Caribbean, and then breaking the world up into different regions, and now breaking it up into individual countries, and even within the countries, the different cost bands. Because obviously, as Brian said, as long as there's money to be made, there's going to be fraud, and those high cost destinations are where the fraudsters can make the most money. So keeping an eye on those and having that more granular view has been important to our evolution with our application.
When you mentioned the original, the early days with Protector and how there was the different systems, Mary Hockheimer, who I believe is on this call today, she and I were talking last month about how there used to be a version of Protector that used dot matrix printers to generate alerts, and how just how the fraud management efforts have evolved since that time. So, and in Byron's comments earlier, talking about the call cell operations and mentioning IRSF, so there's been a shift over the years in how you monetize fraud. Fraud is here, it's staying, but there's been a shift in monetizing. David, does that resulted in a significant change in the way or type of customers that seek fraud management solutions?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two questions there. Certainly the monetization, moving from call cell operations to revenue share, was a big change for all of us. One, it increased the level of threat because it just became so ubiquitous, and it was so easy for people to monetize it. But then there's also a shift in what fraud looked like. When it was call cell operations, it was really long duration calls to high cost destinations. The people that were motivated to go to a call cell operation to purchase the ability to make a phone call, they were trying to call family overseas, those kinds of things. And in an IRSF world, they're just trying to pump out traffic. So, we're seeing much shorter duration calls, the same numbers dialed over and over again, whereas it used to be long duration calls to multiple different numbers. And then I was going to say something else, and I'm trying to remember what the second part of that question was.
If you had noticed a change in how that affected customers that were seeking the solution.
Yeah, well, the other big change that we've seen, it's not driven so much by the monetization, but just the changes in the industry. When I first started, the people that Byron talked about in 1986 that were starting up telecom companies, they came from the big, from AT&T and other large carriers, and then we've had successive generations of new entrants into the market. And for a number of years, each of those generations was driven by people that came from other telecom companies. And they would go start up a new telecom company, and they recognize that, I got to have a switch, I got to have a billing system, and I need fraud management system. It's just kind of table stakes. And the shift we saw starting maybe 10 or 15 years ago as different kinds of companies entered the industry. You had IT companies, ISPs, data centers, those kinds of, so folks that came from more of an IT or data background, when they started entering the voice market, and I'm sure everyone on this call has had this experience of talking to some folks who come from that background who, the perception is voice is just another application. And, anyone that's been in telecom for a long time, I think we kind of bristle at that a little bit because voice is so much more sophisticated than most other applications, not least of which because of all the different cost and regulatory overlays on the voice the voice services as opposed to other services. But what we saw was those companies coming into the market not realizing that fraud was a big issue, and so there's we would have conversations with these new entrants, say, what are you going to do for fraud management? And they're like, oh, we got that covered. We can build something in-house, or we're not that worried about it. And it seemed like for those companies, it took getting hit a couple of times to begin to realize, oh, this is something different than what we're used to, and we need to approach this differently. So that's been a big shift from fraud management being table stakes to not really, new entrants not really understanding the need for a fraud management system.
Okay, I appreciate those comments. And I'd like to now ask Christy about you. David just spoke a little bit about from the sales side of things and what he's seen. I'd like Christy for you to comment on your experience of helping customers implement a fraud management solution. Give me a little insight into that, please.
I think one of the things that I like best about working at Equinox is that we are a smaller company and we're very customer focused. We are flexible, and particularly when we're deploying a fraud system, realistically, most people do not buy a fraud system until they have had a significant, fraud event, a significant loss to fraud. So when we are doing an installation of Protector, it is normally, we're working on a really tight timeline. Our priority is to get the system up and running and get our customers trained just as quickly as possible. A lot of our, because we do work with a good number of, as David mentioned, startup companies, a lot of our training process is not just training for our software, it's training, like teaching people, what is telecom fraud? How and why are people, compromising your network? So a lot of it is not just educating them on how to use our particular software. It's, what are you supposed to be looking, what are you looking for? And we do a lot of in addition to that initial implementation and training, we do a lot of ongoing training. So as I'm attending as we are attending the CFCA meetings, as we are talking to our customers, one of our goals is to be sharing that information, with our entire customer base as much as possible. Doing things like, even sharing, hot list numbers and things like that. But I would say that, we have some, some really interesting stories about, small customer in the Caribbean calls us on a Friday because they've had a major fraud event. They've had to basically shut down international calling on their, they've got a single switch out there, and they've had to basically, because of fraud, they've had to stop international calling until we can get Protector installed and start monitoring their traffic. And we can have that done in a matter of a few days. So that's one of the things that I really love about my job is being able to help people solve those problems and help them understand, because a lot of them don't come from a telecom background. They may come from an IT type background.
Sure. And I know that the people in CFCA appreciate you going, and as you said earlier, the collaborative nature of it is awesome for education and sharing that information. What do you say to somebody, Christy, when they tell you they don't have a fraud problem?
Well, I mean, and we honestly hear that, oh, we have had fraud in the past, but we fixed that problem. We have secured our network, and there's, there's no such thing really. So I've actually gone out and been sitting in a training room with a group of people, training them on Protector. And as we start, it's the process of training, we're reviewing, violations that Protector has generated. And I've actually had a group of people like just stop the training and get up and leave the room, because what they're seeing, I always go into to the training and let people know that, these are the initial violations, there may be false alarms. We have to tune the system in that. And before I know it, they're looking at the violations and realizing they're not false alarms, and that I've actually had to just postpone, stop training, let people address issues so that we could continue on. But we work with a really wide range of customers, large carriers down to, small rural carriers. There is no one who doesn't have fraud or isn't, exposed to it.
Sure. David, I'd like to ask you to weigh in on the same question I just asked Christy, more from you see kind of a different set of contexts in the sales universe. So what do you say to someone that tells you I don't have a fraud problem?
Well, a lot of times it's, what Christy has said. I'll share some of those stories that, if you don't think you have a fraud problem, you're probably just not looking in the right places. And, what kind of bad debt do you have? And there are times that, people just haven't experienced fraud yet, and it's just a matter of time. One of the things that we hear too is people will say, we've done these things in-house, or we've built an in-house solution that can help us identify fraud. And those solutions oftentimes will work for a period of time, but the challenge with an internally built system is that you've got a set of developers who are writing code to address the fraud problem that carrier knows they are experiencing. And there's just a lot of context that they don't have. And that's where I think a vendor supported solution is really good, because a vendor is going to build into their fraud management solution the context of all of their customers over all the years that they've had that solution. And I think that's where CFCA comes in as well, is creating that venue for people to understand, this may be the narrow slice of fraud that I'm seeing, but the whole universe looks like this, and I need to be thinking about looking at different kinds of data in different kinds of ways, and protecting for different kinds of fraud beyond just that little narrow slice that I currently see. And the other challenge with in-house build, we have customers make the decision to build a solution in-house, is you get it up and running, and then you're kind of at the end of the line for any new changes. So you get something up and running, and then you go back to your IT department and say, okay, this is a good start. We also need it to do this and this and this. And everyone knows that most people's experience with their IT team is that those additional requests for enhancements or for maintenance of an in-house built system, it's really hard to get prioritization for those.
Sure. And you brought into CFCA and its role in that. Christy, I think you've been to the most CFCA meetings of all of the Equinox people. I know that Byron and David both have been to some on their own and with you, but I believe you've been to the most. What's the most valuable part of the CFCA meetings, and what do you find most beneficial?
That's hard to say. There are really two things that stand out for me at the CFCA meetings. The first is that collaboration, and having this really safe space where you can talk with people and become friends with people. I mean, I was looking at the list of people who have joined the meeting, and I am very familiar with lots of them. Lots of them are Equinox customers, but some are vendors that, and I was, as I was looking at that, it's like, I'm really looking forward to the next CFCA meeting because I miss these people. So there's this, that is a big part of the CFCA is, that the networking. If I have a question about something that one of our customers is seeing and maybe I don't understand it, I know that I can pick up the phone or I can email any number of people and I'm going to get additional, I'm going to get, honest, open information. That's one of the things that I value the most. And the other is the programming at CFCA.
Yes.
The team that works really hard. I mean, it is very hard to put together, 3 meetings per year and have valuable content in those meetings. And I think that the CFCA just does a really good job of selecting presenters that cover a wide range of topics in, telecom fraud or communications fraud. I've sat in sessions and I thought, it's maybe it's somebody presenting who works for a bank or a credit card company or something like an equipment vendor. And I'm thinking that, that this really doesn't apply to me. And I always take away something from every one of those presentations that, just maybe a different way of thinking about things, even if it doesn't apply directly to, our products. I always learn something. So I really appreciate the effort that the team at CFCA puts into really putting together valuable content. I know that's been really hard during COVID. And it's hard to put together a good program, for the meetings, but I just want everyone to know that how much I appreciate it as someone who attends. And I appreciate all the people who take their time to put together presentations. I always learn something.
Yes, it's excellent. The programming, and Sarah and the team there has done a fantastic job. And as you said, not just 3 meetings a year, but now with being virtual, they've had to come up with so many sessions over the whole month. They've done a fantastic job. Byron, how about you share one of your standout memories from a CFCA meeting you've been to? You have spanned the longest tenure of attending those meetings. What about you? Don't forget to unmute yourself, Byron, so we can hear your story.
My bad. Here we go. So I'd like to say that it's been all these scintillating presentations that I've heard over 30 years at CFCA, but honestly, I've given them, I've heard other people giving them, and I don't remember any of them, but I do remember the people. And I remember those are the memories that are most fun for me. The one that, as we were talking about what we were going to say in this, there was one time there was a meeting in Chicago, and there was a guy from Canada. His name was Brett Anderson. I don't remember what company he was with, honestly. But as we all know, when we go to these meetings, we don't just go to the sessions. We try to enjoy the city that we're in. And so Brett skipped out and went to a Cubs game one afternoon in August. And then he was supposed to go to dinner with us that evening. And so Brett got to dinner. And it was at the Cheesecake Factory in Chicago. And Brett had sat in the sun at the Cubs game at Wrigley Field, and gotten so sunburned. And Brett was follically challenged. He had a bald pate. And so he was so sunburned, and he was evidently, in order to combat the effects of the sun, he had partaken of several beers during the day. And so he sat down at the table and he just slumped over and said, "Oh, I feel so bad. I'm just going to order a salad." And so he ordered a salad. And if you've ever been to Cheesecake Factory, you know that they never serve anything small. So this huge salad shows up in front of Brett, and he almost just laid his face and he goes, "Oh God, I can't eat that." But those are the stories that I remember. And I'm going to tell this story. It has nothing to do with CFCA. But it does have something to do with somebody here on the call, Mary Hockheimer. And these are the memories that I have. Mary was, gosh, I don't even know who you were working for, Mary, but you went to North Carolina and met us at a company called BTI to look at their installation of Protector. And I'd taken one of our developers with us, Derek Drake. And we sat with Kay Ellis and someone else at BTI. We looked at the system. Mary liked it. It was great. So we were driving back to the airport, and I'm kind of, how can I say this? Spontaneous. So we passed a putt-putt course that had a go-kart track, and we had plenty of time. We said, hey, look, go-karts. And so we stopped and we got on go-karts, Mary and myself and Derek. And Mary had someone with her who ended up in Costa Rica, as I recall. But we're racing, and I think I ran Mary off the track. I was no longer selling, I was winning. And Derek afterwards said, you can't do that. I said, sure I can. It just shows her that I'm going to win. And those kind of memories, that's what I remember about the people here on this call and the people that we've served over the years. It's just, these are a great group of people, and relationships are just the most important thing in life. And the relationships you get from CFCA and from just the entire industry are they're the richness that makes your life worth living.
Yes, you're right. David, what about you? What about one of your standout memories from a CFCA meeting that you've attended?
Well, like Byron and Christy said, certainly the dinners that we've had with customers are a big part of it. I remember going with the group to Brennan's in New Orleans and the CN Tower in Toronto, the rotating restaurant. So those are highlights. For me, the sessions, as Christy talked about as well, are often really valuable as well. And I can think of two kind of epiphanies that I had at CFCA meetings. One was, I think this was Miami in 2018, and I think it was Verizon did a presentation, and it was a recap of a case that they'd worked in with law enforcement. And at one point they were showing some video, and it was a video of a traffic pumping operation. And it was, some guy's apartment, and he had this whole room set up with just like racks of servers that were just, all connected to the internet and all making VoIP calls. And it just kind of like, I knew that existed, but it was really cool to see that data center, in this hacker's apartment, and to kind of have that context when I talk to customers or prospective customers about international revenue share fraud. That's not just this abstraction, but in my mind, when I'm having that conversation, I'm always thinking about, this is the person behind this that's doing this. This is what their world looks like and the kind of equipment that they're using. And then another memory I have, and I'm pretty sure it was Adam Panaccia years ago doing a session on international revenue share fraud. And I understood the broad outlines of how IRSF worked, but there were always a couple of there's kind of this like middle ground I was always kind of confused about. And he just I think he had several illustrations, essentially drew the call flow on the board or something, and then started talking about the IPRN providers, which was always, I think, where my gap in my understanding was, and the role of those IPRN providers and how they facilitated the market. And that was just a huge epiphany for me as he explained that. I was like, okay, this kind of fills in these gaps. And so those are the things that I've, in addition to the relationships, but just the content in the sessions of having those moments where you see something or hear something that just gives you more context and helps you better understand what fraud looks like and how fraud management can be more effective.
So clearly, thank you, David. Clearly, as we've heard over and over through the panelists' comments, that the education part of CFCA is invaluable and beneficial to everyone involved and moves the fraud management effort forward for everybody. So that's excellent. Now, Sarah and I were talking when we first were planning this session, and we talked about, in particular, the last couple of years where we've been online and not gotten to go to meetings. And one of the things we talked about was things we've lost during the pandemic, and personal connections, face-to-face connections. And we talked some about Mark Z with CFCA passed on last year, and Derek Drake from Equinox also passed on last year. So we talked some about how at Mark's memorial, Sarah learned some things about him that she just didn't know about him in life. And we talked some about the opportunity to share personal anecdotes with each other just as a way to strengthen our connections. So I'm going to start and I'm going to tell everyone personal fact about me that I don't think most people know. And then I'm going to ask each of the panelists to do the same. So 2 things about me that I don't think many people know. I don't have a middle name. I don't have one, and I get a lot of flack about that. People don't believe me when I fill out forms, or they'll say, no, what is it? I don't have one, but you just don't like it, but you have to put it down. But I don't have one. So when I was born, it was at a time when mothers spent more time in the hospital than they do now. And I was 3 weeks late. And the day that I was born, I guess my mother was going to have amniocentesis, but I was born. And at the time, she and my father disagreed over the name they were going to give me. And in the end, on the 7th day, when they were going to send us home, the hospital said, well, you have to put something on this form. So they agreed on a first name, which is Amy, and they put it on there. But my father is a mechanical engineer, and so he believed in filling out every blank on the birth certificate. So in the middle name field, he put none. Fortunately, my mother was at the time a neonatal intensive care nurse at the hospital where I was born. And so when she went home, one of her friends in the hospital was in the records department, and she saw that come through. So she called and said, unless this is some French no-nay, like we don't know what this is, but if this is really the word none, you need to take this off, or that's going to be her legal middle name. So they took it off. I do not have a middle name. And I do get people say, well, if you don't like it, just tell us anyway. But I really don't have one. And I did not change my name when I was married. So the same 2 names I've had my whole life. So that's my personal fact about me. Byron, what about you? Tell us something personal about you, please.
Well, thank you, Nunn.
Yes. I had some friends in high school that called me Amy Nunn. So when I started here, Dennis made me put my middle name. That's the N in my initials is the Nunn.
You're never going to live that down. Things you don't know about me. Maybe the go-kart story tells you I'm a little bit of a risk taker. I have a horrible combination. I'm a risk taker and I'm very clumsy. So I probably have more broken bones than everybody on this call combined, I would suspect. And it doesn't slow me down. I love the adrenaline rush, whether it be 4-wheeling, bicycling, skydiving, whatever. I love it. So anybody wants to go on an adventure trip, I'm ready to go.
And we know that's true. He comes back sometimes on Monday from the trip, and we're kind of scared to ask what just happened. David, what about you? What is some personal fact about you that the people on the call may not know?
Well, first, let me say something. You were talking about, Derek's passing in CFCA, and
yes,
it reminded me that that Connie Joe from Windstream actually came to Derek's memorial service.
Wasn't that awesome?
Yeah. So just those, and Derek had been to a bunch of CFCA meetings and fit right in with that crowd, and love to hang out with them. I don't think I have anything nearly as interesting to tell you about myself as you and Byron do. The most of my life centers around my family. I've got 2 kids in college, one in Wisconsin and one in California, and that's a big part of my life. And I guess the other thing that a lot of my life centers around is I'm very involved in my church, and I've been the treasurer for our church for the last 5 years. So all of the spreadsheet skills that I've learned at Equinox, I am putting to use there.
Yes, I was sorry. Someone just in the chat said that they were so glad they got to see Derek at the CFCA event. And I was like, yeah, that's the last one I was at as well. Christy was there. We were in Vegas in 2020, and there was a leap day that year. It was, anyway, that was, and I met Sarah in person at that event too. So it was wonderful. Christy, what about a personal fact from you, please?
I am like I'm not a risk taker. I'm probably the most boring person at Equinox. I guess I am completely devoted to my family. I have an adult son that I probably am still a little too actively involved in his life, but I love working at Equinox. And I think that I come from a science background, but in my imagination, in my head, I'm like an artist. So I have, over the years, I can't tell you how many canvases and painting sets and things I have purchased and thrown away over time. But when I see art, I have this this vision of me creating art, but I have absolutely no talent. So it's just something
You do
that
too.
I
I've
love,
seen your
and
paintings.
I love, and I fantasize that one day I'm gonna like hit my head and wake up and be able to paint. That's my dream.
You can already paint. I've seen them. They're beautiful. Well, as we wrap up this call, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to thank the panelists for their contributions and chats. I would like Byron, as the founder of our company and the longest associated member with CFCA, to close us out. Do you have any words of wisdom to wrap things up, Byron?
Well, no, but I'll talk. It's never stopped me from talking before. Amy, thank you for all of the work that you put in this, and David and Christy. I mean, Equinox has the best employees. I love my family here at Equinox. They're great people, and they serve all of you very well. One of the things that's a little bit strange for me is I've always been the youngest in almost everything I've ever done. I started school when I was had nothing to do with my intelligence. I promise you, it had all to do with the laws in the state of Tennessee. You could start first grade when you were 5 years old or 4 years old. I don't know. But I went to college and I was only 17. I had jobs that typically older people had. And now I find myself, I suspect I'm the oldest person on this call. I know I'm the oldest person at Equinox. And it's an odd feeling. A few years ago, Wayne and I have a different way of running the company. And it's always been a quiet way. We don't toot our own horns too much, but about 5 years ago, we decided that we would start sharing some things that we've done over the years that were important to our success. So I'll do it now. I read a book when we first started Equinox called Echoes of Mercy by a lady by the name of Nancy Alcorn, who had a nonprofit that helped unwed mothers. In fact, my son, my 21-year-old son, Isaac, is adopted from Mercy Ministries. But she wrote in her book that all the money that came into her organization, she took 10% of it and gave it away to others. So Wayne and I took that 35 years ago and said, okay, let's do that. For every dollar of profit that comes in, we'll give away 10% of it. So over the years, and we've never, up until recently, we've never told anyone we did this, but over the years, Wayne would send me an email at the beginning of each quarter that says, you have this much money to give away. And unlike some people that were giving away money, we didn't have big cardboard checks printed up and have our picture put in the paper. In fact, we would just send checks to organizations and individuals without ever telling them who we were. They would just get a check, no letter. And over the years, we have helped put people through college. We've helped organizations that serve the community. And it is the most fulfilling thing that I've ever been a part of. David can tell you what our revenues have been every quarter for the last 25 years. Honestly, I cannot. That doesn't matter to me as much as the people that we serve and the customers that we have, the employees that we have. Relationships are the most important thing in life. And I want everybody to hear it from an old man that the riches are not in your bank account. The riches are in the communities that you're part of and the relationships that you have with other people. And if you can take care of that, you'll be happy the rest of your life. One story that we tell sometimes, we had a customer, and I'm not going to tell who they are, but they had Protector. They were going through some hard times and they couldn't renew their maintenance. But we knew that if they didn't renew their maintenance and didn't keep using the software, that the young lady who was running the software for them would lose her job. And she was a single mom. She needed the job, and we were friends with her, just like we're friends with all the customers. So Wayne and I took us about 10 seconds to decide that we would just give the software to that company so she could have a job. And it's no skin off our back, but that kind of attitude are the memories that we have, just like the memories of Brett Anderson at the Cheesecake Factory and Mary at the go-kart track and Derek. Don't even get me started about what Derek meant to me personally and meant to Equinox and meant to CFCA. A wonderful, wonderful man. But that relationship is, the past 2 years have been horrible, but losing Derek has just been a blow to us, and not in terms of our ability to create software, but in terms of the loss in our heart. And so,
Absolutely.
People are the most important thing in life. It's not your bank account. It's not your company. It's the people, whether it's our competitors, David Nasselbaum, Jason Lane Sellers, Nicole Sedata, everybody. It's just important that we take care of each other. So thank you for letting us do this. We've enjoyed it. Hoping for 35 more years of CFCA. Not me in particular, but there will be Equinox people there. So thank you, Sarah, for letting us do this. Thank you, Amy, for preparing us so well.
Thanks, Byron, Christy, and David, for all your comments and stories. There's a rich history there, and I know that everyone enjoyed hearing that. Thanks, Sarah, for all the work you do and for the marketing committee putting all the programs together.
Thank you. No, thank you, Equinox, for being so loyal. And Byron, you nearly had me there. You're so right. And this was something that Amy and I discussed when we lost Mark Z from the board of CFCA last year. We don't know enough about each other. And I think it's really important to share those things. And from a business point of view, that connects us as well. And there's one thing I always say is you buy from people and the relationships. When, for example, when I want a plumber, this is my saying. When I want a plumber, I think, who do I know? I don't know anyone. Okay, I'll ask a friend. Do you know a plumber? They don't know anyone either. Okay, I'll go on the internet. And I think sales in telecoms fraud, for a vendor like you, I think it works exactly the same. You build a network with people, you become friends with people, and they are the people that you call out to first. And those relationships are built at events like CFCAs, where they're intimate and small, but still big, but not like these huge big events, you know, Mobile World Congress or whatever. But you actually build relationships with people over food, over a drink, and they're the people you call on when you need something. That's my saying anyway.
I'd like to make a comment. I thought this was a wonderful session. I don't want to steal anyone's thunder. I've been around the CFCA a long time, and from the very first moment I stepped in, I don't have quite as many years as Byron does, but from my very first meeting, Byron was a fixture, and David and Christy, and I just, you know, my interactions with Byron's like, why is this guy so nice to me, but he never tries to sell to me? I couldn't figure it out. Like, was there something wrong with me? But like, it all comes back, and just knowing the team and being invited to their user sessions. It's just a wonderful group of people to work with, very loyal, and very just a great bunch of people. And I just want to say thank you for this session.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Adam. And thank you everybody for attending. What a feel-good session that was. Some real nostalgic memories, and that was really good. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week as well. Thank you so much, Equinox, and we hope to see you at our next live event.
Yes.
With that-
Details on that coming out very, very soon.